The industrial cleaner mixed with leftover lunch odors created that familiar Friday afternoon smell in Riverside Elementary's cafeteria. Connor Mitchell pushed his janitor's cart through the empty space, the wheels squeaking against polished linoleum as he moved between scattered crumbs and forgotten napkins. It was 1:15 p.m. Lunch period had ended 15 minutes ago, and the cafeteria should have been empty, except for the lingering scents of chicken nuggets and chocolate milk. But it wasn't empty. In the far corner near the windows overlooking the playground, where children's laughter drifted through the glass like distant music, sat a girl in a wheelchair. She was maybe 9 or 10, with straight blonde hair falling like a curtain around her face as she bent over a sketchbook. Her small frame was perfectly still, perfectly alone, surrounded by the echoes of conversation and friendship that had moved on without her. Connor stopped mid-push, his calloused hands gripping the cart handle. He'd been working at Riverside Elementary for 8 months now, ever since his aerospace engineering career had imploded, along with his company's defense contracts. Single fatherhood had forced him to take whatever stable job came with health insurance, even if it meant trading equations for mop buckets and late-night custodial shifts. He'd learned to be invisible, to clean around the edges of other people's lives without drawing attention to his fall from professional grace. But something about this scene felt wrong. A child forgotten, left behind, while life continued around her. He approached slowly, his work boots squeaking against the floor. "Hey there," he said gently, not wanting to startle her. "You okay?" The girl looked up, her bright blue eyes intelligent but carrying something resigned that no child should have to bear. There was surprise in her expression, as if adults rarely spoke to her directly. "Oh, hi," she said, her voice matter-of-fact. "Yeah, I'm fine." "The cafeteria closed 15 minutes ago," Connor said, glancing around at the empty tables and chairs. "Where's your teacher? Your aide?" "Mrs. Patterson had an emergency with another student." The girl's voice was rehearsed, like she'd explained this situation before. "She'll be back soon." She paused, then added with heartbreaking casualness, "Everyone forgets I'm here sometimes." The words hit Connor like a punch to the chest, not because they were said with anger or self-pity, but because they were stated as simple fact. This child had accepted invisibility as her permanent condition. Connor pulled out a chair and sat down at her eye level, his janitor's uniform crinkling. The gesture seemed to surprise her. "I'm Connor," he said. "I work here. What's your name, Lily?" She gestured at her sketchbook, which was filled with intricate butterfly drawings. "I was just finishing this monarch. Did you know they migrate thousands of miles? Some travel from Canada all the way to Mexico." Connor leaned closer, genuinely impressed by the detail in her artwork. The butterfly's wings were shaded with professional-level precision, each pattern carefully observed and recreated. "These are incredible, Lily. You're really talented." Something shifted in Lily's expression, a flicker of surprise that someone was actually looking at her work instead of just her wheelchair. "Thanks," she said softly. "Most people don't notice?" "Well, I'm noticing," Connor said, studying the drawing more carefully. "That shading technique is amazing. How long have you been drawing butterflies? Since I was little. My dad used to take me to the butterfly conservatory before he—" She trailed off, then recovered. "I like studying their migration patterns. Monarchs are incredible navigators. They use the sun and magnetic fields to find their way thousands of miles to places they've never been." Connor found himself genuinely interested. "That's fascinating. What else do you know about them?" For the next 10 minutes, they talked about butterflies and migration patterns, about the difference between monarchs and painted ladies, about how caterpillars transform in their chrysalis. Lily's face grew more animated with each question Connor asked, her intelligence shining through as she explained complex scientific concepts with the enthusiasm of someone who rarely had an audience for her knowledge. "Did you know," Lily said, her eyes bright with excitement, "that monarch butterflies weigh less than a paperclip, but they can fly 3,000 miles? Their wings are basically just scales, but they're perfectly designed for long-distance flight. I had no idea, Connor admitted. That's incredible engineering. The aerodynamics must be amazing. You know about engineering? Lily asked, tilting her head curiously. Connor felt a familiar pang. A little, he said. I used to work with airplanes. Before Lily could ask more questions, Mrs. Patterson rushed back in, her face flushed and apologetic. Lily, I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Tommy had an accident in the bathroom and I couldn't leave him, and by the time I got help... She noticed Connor sitting with Lily. Oh, hello. I hope she wasn't bothering you. Not at all, Connor said, standing up. We were just talking about butterflies. Lily knows more about migration than most scientists. Lily beamed at the compliment as Mrs. Patterson helped her gather her things. As they prepared to leave for afternoon classes, Lily glanced back over her shoulder at Connor. Thank you for talking to me, she said quietly. About butterflies? Thank you for teaching me, Connor replied. I learned something new today. She smiled, then small and uncertain, but real. That night, lying in his cramped two-bedroom apartment after putting 7-year-old Emma to bed, Connor couldn't stop thinking about those words. Everyone forgets I'm here sometimes. He knew that feeling. After his wife Jennifer died in that car accident 3 years ago, after the insurance money barely covered funeral costs after his engineering firm downsized him out of a job. Along with half their workforce, Connor had become invisible too. The professional colleagues who'd once respected his expertise didn't return his calls. The neighbors who'd attended backyard barbecues suddenly found reasons to cross the street. Being invisible was a special kind of loneliness, the kind that made you wonder if you'd stopped mattering entirely. He thought about Lily, brilliant and kind, sitting alone in that cafeteria day after day. He thought about her butterfly drawings and her scientific enthusiasm, and the way her face had lit up when someone actually listened to her knowledge. Tomorrow, he decided he'd bring an extra sandwich. 32 floors above downtown Seattle, Victoria Chen stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office, watching the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Elliott Bay. Her reflection stared back from the glass, a woman in an immaculate navy suit, with her dark hair pulled into a severe bun, diamond earrings catching the light. At 38, she commanded one of the fastest-growing technology companies on the West Coast, but right now she felt utterly powerless. Miss Chen. Her assistant's voice came through the intercom. Your car is waiting for the airport. The Tokyo flight departs at 6:30. Victoria closed her eyes briefly. Another international trip, another missed dinner with Lily. Another evening of explaining to her daughter through video calls why Mommy had to work late again. Tell them 5 more minutes, she said. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lily's aide. Lily had a good day at school, working on butterfly project for science fair. Will be in bed by 8 p.m. The message was professional, efficient, and completely devoid of the warmth Victoria desperately wanted to provide, but didn't know how to give. Victoria had built Chen Technologies from a startup in her garage to a billion-dollar empire, but every success felt hollow when measured against her failures as a mother. 4 years ago, when David died in that climbing accident on Mount Rainier, she'd thrown herself into work with the fury of someone trying to outrun grief. The company became her sanctuary, the only place where she felt in control, where problems could be solved with strategy and determination. But Lily needed more than strategy. Lily needed presence, patience, understanding all the things Victoria had forgotten how to provide in her quest to build financial security for their future. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent 4 years creating a fortune to ensure Lily would never want for anything, while her daughter wanted for the one thing money couldn't buy, her mother's attention. Miss Chen. The assistant's voice was more insistent now. The traffic to SeaTac is heavy. If we don't leave soon... I'm coming, Victoria said, grabbing her briefcase and laptop bag. As she headed toward the door, she caught sight of the framed photo on her desk. Lily at age 5, laughing in David's arms at the Pike Place market, both of them covered in flour, after attempting to make pancakes. Victoria had been at a conference that weekend, missing what turned out to be one of their last happy moments together. She paused her hand on the door handle. When was the last time she'd heard Lily laugh like that? When was the last time she'd sat down with her daughter without checking emails or taking calls? The questions followed her into the elevator and down to the waiting car. Meanwhile, across town in their small apartment near Northgate, Connor was helping Emma with her math homework at their kitchen table. The space was modest clean, but worn with second-hand furniture and appliances that had seen better days. Emma sat on a booster seat, her tongue poking out the side of her mouth as she concentrated on addition problems. The same expression Connor remembered from her mother. "Dad, this one's hard," Emma said, pointing to a word problem about trains and distances. Connor looked at the problem, and for a moment his engineer's mind automatically began calculating rates and times before he caught himself. "Let's think about it together," he said, pushing aside memories of complex calculations and aerodynamic models. "If the train leaves Chicago at 2 p.m. and travels 60 miles per hour, why don't you do the airplane job anymore?" Emma asked suddenly, her question interrupting his explanation. "You used to go to work in nice clothes and come home not tired." The question hit harder than Connor expected. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that sometimes life takes everything you thought you were and leaves you starting over? That sometimes the world decides you're not important anymore? "I like this job better," Connor said. Which wasn't entirely true. "It means I can be home with you more. Remember how Daddy used to travel for work, and you'd stay with Mrs. Patterson for days?" Emma nodded solemnly. "I like you being home more too, but are you sad about it? Sometimes you look sad when you're cleaning your work clothes." Children saw everything Connor realized: his pride, his grief, his daily struggle to accept that providing stability for Emma mattered more than his bruised ego. "Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices," he said gently. "But I'm not sad when I'm with you." "Good," Emma said, returning to her math problem. "Because you're the best dad even if your job isn't fancy." After Emma was in bed, Connor sat at the kitchen table with a beer and his laptop scrolling through job listings for engineering positions. The requirements had changed during his 3 years away from the field. New software, new regulations, new technologies that made his experience seem outdated. The rejections came regularly now. Polite emails explaining that they'd found someone with more recent experience. His phone buzzed with a text from his neighbor. Heard Emma giggling during homework. Good to hear laughter in that apartment again. Mrs. Patterson was right. For the first time since Jennifer's death, their small apartment felt like a home instead of just a place to exist. Emma was thriving in school, making friends, building the normal childhood. Connor was determined to provide, despite their circumstances. Maybe that was enough. Maybe being the best father he could be was more important than reclaiming his professional identity. But late at night, in the quiet hours when Emma was asleep and the weight of responsibility felt heaviest, Connor couldn't shake the feeling that he'd lost more than a job. He'd lost himself, his purpose, his sense of contributing something meaningful to the world. The butterfly conversation with Lily had reminded him what it felt like to use his mind for something beyond mopping floors and emptying trash cans. Tomorrow he decided he'd find Lily again. Maybe they could both use a friend who understood what it meant to feel invisible. The next Monday, Connor found himself looking for Lily during his lunch break rounds. He'd packed an extra peanut butter and jelly sandwich, telling himself it was just in case she was forgotten again, but knowing it was really because he'd enjoyed their conversation more than anything in recent memory. He found her in the same corner of the cafeteria, but today she wasn't alone. A group of 4th graders sat at a nearby table, their voices carrying across the space as they planned their afternoon recess games. Lily sat with her sketchbook open, occasionally glancing their way, but never being included in the conversation. "Mind if I join you?" Connor asked, pulling out his lunch and the extra sandwich. The teacher's lounge smells like burnt coffee and broken dreams. Lily laughed a sound like wind chimes that made the nearby table of children look over curiously. "Only if you want to hear about butterfly metamorphosis," she said. "That's exactly what I want to hear about," Connor replied, settling into the chair beside her wheelchair. Over the following weeks, it became their routine. Every day during his lunch break, Connor would sit with Lily sharing his simple sandwiches while she shared her vast knowledge of Lepidoptera. He learned that she had cerebral palsy affecting her legs, but leaving her brilliant mind completely unimpacted. He learned that she wanted to be a marine biologist when she grew up, fascinated by the migration patterns of sea creatures, the way she was obsessed with butterfly journeys. "Did you know," Lily said one afternoon, carefully shading the wings of a swallowtail butterfly, "that some sea turtles migrate 10,000 miles? They use magnetic fields to navigate, just like butterflies use the sun." I didn't know that, Connor admitted, genuinely fascinated. "How do they remember the route scientists think it's genetic memory?" Lily explained, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Baby turtles born on a beach somehow know to swim to feeding grounds their parents used thousands of miles away. It's like they inherit a map." Connor found himself looking forward to these conversations more than he wanted to admit. Lily was brilliant, funny, and carried a wisdom that came from being overlooked by the world. She'd learned to observe people the way scientists observe specimens, seeing patterns and understanding motivations that others missed. "You're different from other grown-ups," Lily said one day out of nowhere. "How so?" Connor asked, unwrapping his sandwich. "Most adults look at me and see the wheelchair first. They talk louder, like being in a wheelchair affects my hearing. Or they talk to whoever's pushing me instead of talking to me directly." She paused, considering her words carefully. "You look at me and see me." The observation was delivered with the matter-of-fact tone of someone who'd spent years analyzing social interactions from the outside. Connor felt his chest tighten with both admiration for her resilience and anger at a world that had taught a 9-year-old child to expect so little. "You're a person," Connor said simply. "A very interesting person with a lot to say. Why wouldn't I want to hear what you're thinking?" "Not everyone thinks that way," Lily said softly. "Even my mom sometimes." She immediately looked guilty for the admission. "She loves me, but she's always working. Important business meetings. She says she's building my future, but sometimes I think she forgets about my present." Connor recognized that struggle intimately. "My daughter Emma asked me yesterday why I don't do airplane work anymore," he said. "I told her I like this job better because I can be home with her more. But the truth is, sometimes I wonder if I'm enough, if not having the fancy job makes me less of a dad." "Are you there when she needs you?" Lily asked. "I try to be." "Then you're enough," Lily said, with the certainty of someone who knew what absence felt like. "Being there is the most important job." Their friendship began affecting both their lives in unexpected ways. Connor started checking out library books about marine biology and butterfly conservation, wanting to keep up with Lily's intellectual curiosity. Emma heard stories about Dad's friend who draws butterflies and began asking when she could meet this mysterious artist. At school, other staff members began noticing Connor's lunch routine. Some approved, recognizing kindness when they saw it. Others whispered about boundaries and appropriate relationships between staff and students. Principal Harrison called him aside one afternoon. "Connor, I need to ask about your lunch meetings with Lily Chen," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "It's unusual for custodial staff to spend personal time with students." Connor felt his chest tighten with defensive anger. "She was sitting alone every day. I just eat my lunch with her so she has company. We talk about science and art. Nothing inappropriate." "I'm not suggesting anything inappropriate," Principal Harrison said quickly. "But Lily's mother is Victoria Chen of Chen Technologies. She's very particular about her daughter's care and safety. I just want to make sure we're following proper protocols." What protocols? Connor asked. Being kind to a lonely kid. You know what I mean, the principal said gently. Class differences, professional boundaries. I'm not saying you need to stop, just be mindful. That night, Connor lay awake thinking about class differences and professional boundaries. He was a janitor. Lily was the daughter of a billionaire. In the real world, outside the protected bubble of their lunch conversations, those differences mattered. People would question his motives, assume he was seeking personal gain, judge him for overstepping his place in the social hierarchy. But when he thought about Lily's smile when he asked about her latest drawing, when he remembered her excitement explaining sea turtle navigation, when he pictured her sitting alone in that cafeteria corner, the external judgments faded. Some things were more important than social conventions. The next day he brought 2 sandwiches again. When Lily asked if he'd gotten in trouble for eating with her, Connor told her the truth. Some people think we're too different to be friends, he said. But I think friendship is about understanding each other, not about having the same job or living in the same kind of house. I think so too, Lily said quietly. Then, with a mischievous smile, she added, Besides, you're the only grown-up who knows the difference between a monarch and a viceroy butterfly. That makes you automatically qualified to be my friend. Connor laughed, feeling lighter than he had in months. Well, when you put it that way, how can I argue with scientific qualification? Their friendship was helping both of them remember what it felt like to be seen, to be valued, to matter to someone. Neither realized how much their lives were about to change, or that their quiet lunch conversations were building toward a moment that would transform not just their own worlds, but the world of a woman 32 floors above downtown Seattle, who was about to discover that her daughter had found what she'd been unable to provide. The poster appeared on the cafeteria bulletin board on a Monday morning in early October, bright yellow paper with dancing silhouettes and elegant script announcing the annual father-daughter dance. Connor noticed it while emptying trash cans near the serving line, and his immediate thought was of Emma's excitement when she found out. She'd been talking about the dance for weeks, ever since her friend Madison mentioned it during a playdate. Daddy, you're going to dance with me, right? Emma had asked, her 7-year-old face serious with the importance of the occasion. Everyone's dad is coming. Madison says there's a DJ and everything. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Skybug Connor had promised already, mentally calculating the cost of a new dress for Emma and decent clothes for himself. But that afternoon, when Connor sat down with Lily for their usual lunch conversation, he immediately noticed something was wrong. Her sandwich sat untouched beside her closed sketchbook, her eyes red-rimmed and distant. Hey, butterfly girl, Connor said gently, using the nickname that had developed over their weeks of friendship. What's going on? Lily tried to smile, but it wobbled uncertainly. Nothing, she said. I'm fine. Lily. Connor's voice was patient but knowing. After 3 weeks of daily conversations, he'd learned to read her moods. She let out a shaky breath. The father-daughter dance is Friday, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Yeah, Emma's been talking my ear off about it, Connor replied, then stopped as understanding dawned. Oh, Lily. My mum hired someone to take me. Lily continued, her words coming faster now, as if she needed to get them out before she lost courage. A professional aide, someone who will push my chair around the dance floor while I sit there like... She trailed off, her voice thick with unshed tears. Like a doll. Like someone's charity project. Connor felt his chest tighten with anger at the injustice of it. This brilliant, wonderful child reduced to being wheeled around by a stranger, while other fathers danced with their daughters. Where's your mom? He asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Tokyo. Big merger meeting. Lily picked at the edge of her sketchbook. She can't make it back in time. She tried, but the deal is worth billions, and if she's not there... Lily shrugged with the practiced resignation of a child who'd learned to accept disappointment. It's fine. I'm used to it. At least I'll be there, right? That's something. Connor looked at this girl, this brilliant, kind, funny girl who'd spent her entire life settling for crumbs when she deserved the whole feast. He thought about Emma bouncing with excitement about their father-daughter date. He thought about Lily, who'd spend the evening being wheeled around by a stranger while watching real fathers dance with their daughters. The decision formed before he could second-guess himself. "Lily," he said carefully, "I have a proposition for you." She looked up curious despite her sadness. "What if you came with me and Emma? As friends? 3's a party, right? We'd love to have you join us." Lily's eyes widened, hope and disbelief warring across her features. But I can't really dance. And wouldn't Emma mind sharing you?" "Let me worry about Emma," Connor said firmly. "You just worry about bringing those butterfly drawings to show her. She loves art, and I've told her about my friend who draws the most amazing butterflies in the world." "Connor, I don't want to be anyone's pity project," Lily said, her voice small but firm. "This isn't pity," Connor interrupted gently. "This is friendship. You've spent 3 weeks telling me about butterfly metamorphosis and listening to me complain about broken faucets. That's what friends do. They show up for each other." Tears spilled over Lily's cheeks, but this time they were different tears. "You really mean that?" "I really mean that," Connor said. "What do you say? Want to come to a dance with the Mitchell family?" "Yes," Lily whispered, then louder with growing excitement. "Yes, I'd love to come with you." That evening, Connor sat Emma down at their kitchen table, nervous about her reaction. 7-year-olds could be possessive about their parents, especially kids who'd already lost one. He wasn't sure how Emma would feel about sharing her special night. "Skybug, I want to talk to you about something." He began watching her face carefully. "You know the father-daughter dance on Friday?" Emma nodded enthusiastically, her brown eyes bright with anticipation. "I'm wearing my purple dress with the sparkles." "That's perfect. So there's a girl at school named Lily. She draws the most amazing butterflies I've ever seen, and she's really nice and funny, but she doesn't have anyone to take her to the dance. Her mom has to work." Connor paused, searching for the right words. "So I was thinking, what if Lily came with us? The 3 of us could go together." Connor held his breath, waiting for disappointment or jealousy. Instead, Emma's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Lily who sits by the big tree at school?" Emma asked excitedly. "The one with the wheelchair who draws all the pretty pictures." "Yeah, that's her. She's so cool." Emma bounced in her chair. "I've always wanted to talk to her, but I didn't know if I should. Can she really come with us? Can she teach me to draw butterflies?" Relief flooded through Connor. He should have known his daughter's generous heart would shine through. "I think she'd love that." "This is the best dance ever," Emma declared. "I'm going to make her a friendship bracelet." "What's her favorite color? I don't know, actually. I'll make one with all the colors, then," Emma said, already running toward her room to start crafting. "Purple and blue and pink and yellow." She's going to love it. As Emma's excited chatter faded down the hallway, Connor felt something shift in his chest. Pride, maybe, or hope. His daughter, who'd lost her mother at age 4, who'd watched her father struggle through grief and career loss, still had enough love in her heart to welcome a lonely stranger. Maybe he was doing something right after all. Friday approached quickly. Connor pressed his one decent button-down shirt, polished his worn dress shoes, and tried not to think about how he'd look next to all the fathers in expensive suits. Pride was a luxury he'd given up 3 years ago, when survival became more important than appearance. Tonight wasn't about him. It was about 2 little girls who deserved to dance. The week leading up to the dance, Connor found himself researching wheelchair dancing techniques online during his lunch breaks. He watched videos of adaptive dance, studied the mechanics of leading someone whose legs couldn't participate, learned about the importance of upper body movement and expression. If he was going to do this, he was going to do it right. Lily noticed his new questions during their lunch conversations. "Why are you asking about arm movements in dance?" she asked suspiciously. "Just curious," Connor said, trying to sound casual. "Want to make sure you have the best time possible on Friday." "Connor, you don't have to make this complicated," Lily said softly. "Just being there with friends is enough. You don't need to turn me into some kind of dancing miracle." "Every girl deserves to feel like she's dancing at her first father-daughter dance," Connor replied. "Let me worry about the details. You just worry about having fun." The truth was, Connor had spent hours thinking about this. He remembered his own childhood, watching his father dance with his sister at school events, the joy on her face as she was spun and dipped and made to feel special. Every child deserved that feeling, wheelchair or not. Thursday night, as Connor helped Emma practice her curtsy and showed her how to follow a lead in simple dance steps, she asked the question he'd been dreading. "Daddy, why doesn't Lily's mom take her to the dance? How do you explain to a 7-year-old that sometimes parents prioritize work over presents, that sometimes love gets buried under responsibility and fear? Sometimes grown-ups make choices that seem important at the time?" Connor said carefully, "Lily's mom works very hard to take care of Lily, but sometimes that means she can't be there for fun things." "That's sad," Emma said with the straightforward emotion of childhood. "If I were Lily's mum, I would want to dance with her." "I think Lily's mum wants to too," Connor replied. "Sometimes wanting something and being able to do it are different things." "Well, I'm glad Lily gets to come with us," Emma declared. "Everyone should have someone to dance with." As Connor tucked Emma into bed that night, he felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Tomorrow he'd be taking 2 girls to their first father-daughter dance. One was his biological daughter, bright and confident and secure in his love. The other was a child who'd been overlooked and forgotten, who'd learned to expect disappointment. He couldn't fix Lily's relationship with her mother. He couldn't change the circumstances that had left her sitting alone in cafeterias and hiring strangers to accompany her to school events. But he could give her one evening where she felt valued, included, seen. Sometimes Connor thought, as he turned off Emma's bedroom light, that was enough. Sometimes showing up was everything. Friday evening arrived with the crisp bite of October air that made Seattle feel alive with possibility. Connor stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie for the 4th time, trying to calm the nervous energy that had been building all week. His reflection showed a man in his mid-30s, brown hair, starting to show grey at the temples, wearing a shirt that was pressed but clearly not expensive. He looked like exactly what he was, a working father doing his best. "Daddy, are you ready?" Emma called from her bedroom. "I need help with my hair." Connor found her standing in front of her small mirror, wearing her purple dress with sequined flowers, her hair in various stages of attempted styling. She'd been working on it for 20 minutes, determined to look perfect for her first real dance. "Let me help, Connor," said, grabbing her brush and hair ties. As he worked to create something approaching a neat ponytail, Emma chattered excitedly. "Do you think Lily will like my friendship bracelet? I made it with all the colors because I couldn't decide. And I practiced my dance moves like you showed me. Do you think she knows how to dance in her wheelchair?" "I think Lily is going to love whatever we do tonight," Connor said, securing the hair tie. "The important thing is that she knows we're happy she's coming with us." 20 minutes later, they pulled up to the Chen residence in Connor's 12-year-old Honda Civic. The contrast was jarring, though Connor had expected it. The house was a sprawling, modern estate, with floor-to-ceiling windows, a circular driveway, and landscaping that probably cost more than Connor made in a year. His beat-up car looked embarrassingly out of place against the backdrop of obvious wealth. Wow, Emma breathed, her face pressed against the passenger window. It's like a princess castle. It's just a house, Skybug, Connor said, though his stomach churned with inadequacy. Lily lives here, but she's still our friend. Remember that. A professionally dressed woman in medical scrubs answered the door when Connor rang the bell. She looked confused to see them standing there. Hello, she said politely. Can I help you? I'm Connor Mitchell, Connor said, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. I'm here to pick up Lily for the father-daughter dance. Oh, there must be some confusion, the woman said, glancing at a clipboard in her hand. Mrs. Chen arranged for me to accompany Lily tonight. I'm her aide for the evening. Plans changed, Connor said firmly but politely. Lily's coming with friends tonight. Is she ready? The aide hesitated clearly, uncertain about protocol. Mrs. Chen was very specific about the arrangements. Sophie Lily's voice called from inside the house. Is that Connor? Lily wheeled into view, and Connor's heart squeezed with emotion. She wore a flowing purple dress that made her look like royalty, her blonde hair curled and clipped back with butterfly barrettes that caught the light. Her face glowed with nervous excitement, but also something Connor had rarely seen in their lunch conversations, pure joy. You came, she whispered, as if she'd half expected him not to show up despite his promises. I always keep my promises. Butterfly girl, Connor said. Emma stepped forward, holding out a bracelet woven from purple, blue, pink, and yellow threads. I made this for you. We're going to have so much fun tonight. Lily's eyes filled with tears as Emma fastened the bracelet around her wrist. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I love it. It's the most beautiful bracelet I've ever seen. Your wheelchair is so cool. Emma continued examining the wheels with scientific interest. Can I push you to the car? I'll be really careful. Sure, Lily said, laughing at Emma's enthusiasm. But I should warn you, I've gotten pretty good at driving this thing myself. As they made their way to the car, Connor noticed the aide watching from the doorway, her phone in her hand, probably calling Victoria Chen to report the change in plans. He felt a moment of anxiety about overstepping boundaries, about the possible consequences of his decision to include Lily. But then he looked at the two girls already chattering like old friends as Emma helped Lily navigate the front steps, and his doubts faded. Some things were more important than protocol. The drive to Riverside Elementary was filled with excited conversation. Lily admired Emma's dress. Emma explained her dance moves, and both girls planned their strategy for the evening. My dad is really good at the slow songs, Emma announced, but he's terrible at the fast ones. He looks like a robot. I heard that Connor said from the driver's seat, making both girls giggle. What about you, Lily? Emma asked. Do you know how to dance? Lily's excitement dimmed slightly. Not really. I mean, I can move my arms, but my legs don't work like yours do. That's okay, Emma said with the matter-of-fact acceptance of childhood. My dad figured out how to make it work. He's really smart about solving problems. Connor caught Lily's eyes in the rearview mirror. Trust me, he asked. She nodded, her smile returning. I trust you. When they arrived at the school, the transformation was immediate and magical. The gymnasium had been decorated with twinkling string lights, paper stars hanging from the ceiling, and a DJ playing upbeat pop music. Fathers in suits and ties were already spinning their daughters across the polished floor, laughter and music filling the space with warmth and joy. Connor immediately felt self-conscious in his pressed but faded shirt and discount tie. Several dads glanced at him, then at Lily's wheelchair, their expressions ranging from curiosity to that particular brand of polite discomfort that well-meaning people wore when confronted with disability. But Lily didn't notice the stares. She was too busy taking in the decorations, the music, the magic of being included in something she'd only watched from the outside. This is beautiful. She breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. Come on, Emma said, wheeling Lily toward the refreshment table. Let's get punch. It's in a glass slipper. Connor hung back, watching the two girls interact with the ease of children who didn't see wheelchairs or differences, just potential for friendship. Emma introduced Lily to her classmates with pride, showing off the friendship bracelet and explaining Lily's butterfly expertise to anyone who would listen. For the first time in months, Connor felt something approaching contentment. Whatever happened on the dance floor, whatever awkwardness might come, this moment was worth it. Lily was surrounded by children her own age being treated as a friend rather than an object of pity or curiosity. The DJ announced the first father-daughter dance, and Connor's stomach tightened with nervous energy. This was the moment of truth. He approached both girls, trying to project more confidence than he felt. "All right, ladies," he said. "Emma, you're up first." He took Emma's hand and led her onto the floor as the opening notes of a sweet, slow song filled the gymnasium. For 3 minutes, the world narrowed to just him and his little girl, spinning her in gentle circles, making her laugh when he dipped her dramatically. Other couples swayed around them, fathers in expensive suits with daughters in designer dresses. But Connor only had eyes for Emma's joy. "Best dad ever," Emma whispered during a quiet moment in the song. "Right back at you. Best daughter ever," Connor replied, his heart full to bursting. When the song ended, Emma hugged him tight, then looked toward Lily, who sat at the edge of the dance floor, watching with an expression that tried to be happy, but couldn't quite hide the longing. Connor knelt beside Lily's wheelchair, meeting her eyes with gentle determination. "Your turn, princess." Lily's breath caught her hands gripping the armrests of her wheelchair. "But I can't dance," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of 9 years of being told what she couldn't do. "Nobody," Connor said, his voice firm but gentle, "ever told a butterfly she couldn't fly just because she started as a caterpillar." He positioned himself behind her wheelchair, and Emma moved to Lily's side, taking her hand. "Trust me, okay? We practiced this." The music began again, something soft and dreamy that floated through the gymnasium, like promise itself. Connor began to wheel Lily across the floor in graceful sweeping arcs, timing his movements to the rhythm of the song. Emma walked beside them, holding Lily's hand and spinning in small circles, her purple dress creating little whirlwinds of sequins and joy. Other dancers paused to watch. Connor felt the weight of their attention, but didn't care. He moved to face Lily, taking both her hands gently and showing her how to move her arms in rhythm with the music, while he swayed her chair in gentle patterns. "I'm dancing." Lily gasped, her voice breaking with emotion as understanding dawned. "I'm really dancing." The song shifted to something more upbeat, and Connor spun the wheelchair in careful turns, while both girls laughed. The sound of their joy carried across the gymnasium, drawing more children toward them. A boy from Emma's class approached first, his curiosity overcoming shyness. "Cool moves, Lily," he called out his approval, genuine and uncomplicated. "Can we dance with you guys?" a girl in a sparkly dress asked, drawn by the infectious happiness radiating from their small group. "Yes," Lily said, her face glowing with an emotion Connor had never seen before: acceptance, belonging, joy. Soon a circle formed around them, children moving together with the natural inclusivity that adults often forgot. Connor spun Lily through the center, while other kids clapped and cheered. Emma taught the group a simple line dance she'd learned in PE class, and Lily participated from her wheelchair, her arms moving in perfect time with the music. The magic of the moment wasn't lost on the watching adults. Connor caught sight of other fathers nodding approvingly, their own daughters asking if they could join the inclusive dance circle. Principal Harrison stood near the refreshment table, with tears in her eyes, her phone out, documenting what was happening. But Connor's attention was focused entirely on Lily's face, flushed with happiness, her eyes bright with tears of joy, instead of the sadness he'd grown accustomed to seeing. She threw her arms around his neck during a quiet moment in the music. "Thank you," she whispered against his ear. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for making me feel normal." "You're not normal," Connor whispered back, holding her gently. "You're extraordinary." As the music swelled and the children cheered, Connor felt something crack open in his chest. This moment, this simple act of inclusion, mattered more than any engineering project he'd ever completed. More than corner offices or professional accolades or society's definition of success. This was what life was actually about, showing up for people who needed someone to show up. Making space at the table for those who'd been relegated to the corners. Seeing the invisible and making them matter. None of them noticed the woman standing in the gymnasium's doorway, still wearing a business suit. From her cancelled flight, her phone hanging forgotten at her side as tears streamed down her face. Victoria Chen had arrived just in time to witness a stranger giving her daughter what all her billions had never been able to provide, pure, uncomplicated joy. She watched Connor spin Lily through the dance circle, watched her daughter's face light up with happiness that made Victoria's chest ache with recognition and regret. Watched Emma treat Lily not as an object of charity, but as a friend, a sister, an equal. This man, this stranger in second-hand clothes, had accomplished in one evening what Victoria had failed to achieve in 9 years of trying to buy her daughter's happiness. He'd made Lily feel seen, valued, included, normal. The song ended to thunderous applause from children and adults alike. Lily sat in her wheelchair, her face radiant, her hands still clasped in Connor's and Emma's, surrounded by a circle of new friends who no longer saw her wheelchair first. Connor looked around at the smiling faces at the teachers wiping away tears at the other fathers who were nodding their approval and respect. This was what community looked like when it worked the way it was supposed to. This was what happened when someone chose kindness over comfort, inclusion over convenience. "Can we do that again?" Lily asked, her voice bright with hope and possibility. "We can do anything you want," Connor promised and meant it. As the evening continued with more dancing, more laughter, more moments of pure joy, none of them realized how profoundly this night would change their lives. They couldn't know that Victoria Chen was already making phone calls, cancelling meetings, restructuring priorities around a daughter she was finally ready to really see. They couldn't predict that this simple act of kindness would ripple outward, transforming not just Lily's world, but the worlds of everyone who witnessed what happened when someone chose to include rather than exclude, to see rather than overlook, to love rather than judge. All they knew was that this moment felt perfect, complete right. A father, 2 daughters, and a community learning what it meant to dance together. The song ended to enthusiastic applause from children and adults alike, but Connor's attention was entirely focused on Lily's face, glowing with a happiness so pure it made his chest tighten with emotion. She looked transformed, not just happy, but radiant, as if someone had turned on a light inside her that had been dimmed for far too long. "That was the best dance ever," Emma declared, slightly out of breath, but beaming. "Did you see how everyone wanted to dance with us?" "I saw," Connor said, kneeling beside Lily's wheelchair. "How did it feel?" "Butterfly girl, like flying." Lily whispered, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "Like I was actually flying." The moment of perfect contentment was interrupted by a subtle shift in the atmosphere around them. Conversations grew quieter, heads turned, and Connor felt the weight of attention settling on their small group in a way that made his protective instincts flare. A woman stood in the gymnasium doorway, and even from across the room Connor could feel the power she commanded. She was tall, elegant, wearing an obviously expensive business suit that screamed boardroom authority. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek bun, and her face carried the kind of composed expression that came from years of commanding rooms full of powerful people. But as Connor watched, that composure cracked. Her carefully controlled expression shifted to something raw and vulnerable, as her eyes found Lily still surrounded by the circle of laughing children, still glowing with the aftermath of being truly included. Mummy Lily's voice carried across the gymnasium, filled with surprise and delight. "Mummy, you came! Look, I was dancing. I was really dancing!" Every conversation in the room stopped. All eyes turned from the billionaire CEO in the doorway to the girl in the wheelchair to the man in the faded shirt who had somehow orchestrated this moment of magic. Victoria Chen began walking toward them, her heels clicking against the polished gymnasium floor with a sound that seemed to echo in the sudden quiet. The crowd parted before her the way crowds always did for people with money and power, but Connor noticed how small she looked despite her obvious authority. How uncertain her steps became as she approached her daughter. Up close, Connor could see that Victoria was younger than he'd expected, maybe late 30s, with the kind of striking features that would have been beautiful, if not for the exhaustion carved into every line of her face. Her designer suit couldn't hide the fact that she looked like someone who hadn't slept in days, and her eyes, despite their obvious intelligence, held a depth of pain that Connor recognized. "Ms. Chen," he said quietly, standing up and straightening his shoulders despite feeling completely outclassed. "I apologize if I overstepped. Lily mentioned you couldn't make it, and I just thought—" He gestured helplessly toward the circle of happy children. "I thought your daughter deserved to dance." Victoria's gaze moved from Connor to Lily, who was practically vibrating with excitement in her wheelchair, then back to Connor. When she spoke, her voice cracked despite her obvious attempt at control. "You thought," she said slowly, "my daughter deserved more than a paid companion. You thought she deserved to be just a little girl at a dance." Connor met her eyes, reading the pain and guilt and desperate hope there. Every child deserves that. The simple statement hung between them, carrying weight that went far beyond the moment. Around them, the noise of the dance gradually resumed as people turned back to their own conversations, but Connor felt the intensity of Victoria's attention like a physical force. "I don't know how to thank you, Victoria," whispered her composure, finally cracking completely. "I don't know how to thank you for giving her what I couldn't." Lily wheeled forward, reaching for her mother's hand with an excitement that made Connor's chest ache. "Mom, this is Connor. He has lunch with me every day, and he knows everything about engineering and butterflies. And this is Emma. She's my best friend, and she made me this beautiful bracelet." Connor watched Victoria's face as the words hit her. Every day. He had lunch with Sophie every day. The realization that her daughter had been forming this meaningful relationship. This daily connection, while Victoria had been halfway around the world closing deals, was visible in her expression like a physical blow. Every day, Victoria repeated quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "Just lunch," Connor said quickly, not wanting to add to her obvious guilt. "We talk about science and art. Lily's incredibly smart. She knows more about migration patterns than most marine biologists." Victoria knelt down, difficult in her pencil skirt and heels, and looked at Lily properly. Really looked at her perhaps for the first time in months. She saw the purple dress Lily had chosen herself. The butterfly barrettes Connor had never seen before. The friendship bracelet Emma had made with such care. She saw the pure joy in her daughter's eyes, the confidence that came from feeling valued and included. "You look beautiful, baby," Victoria said, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry I almost missed this." "But you're here now," Lily said, her forgiveness immediate and unconditional in the way only children could offer. "That's what matters." Victoria stood slowly, turning back to Connor, with an expression that seemed to be warring between gratitude and something that looked like desperation. "Would you," she began, then stopped, seeming to gather courage. "Would you and Emma join us for dinner this weekend? Please. I'd like to properly thank you, and I'd like to get to know the people who've been there for my daughter when I wasn't." Connor hesitated, his eyes automatically dropping to his worn shoes, suddenly acutely aware of the vast gulf between their circumstances. Around them, he could feel other parents watching, listening, judging. The janitor and the billionaire, brought together by a child's need for connection. But then he looked at Lily's hopeful face, at Emma's excited expression, and nodded. "We'd be honored," he said simply. As the dance continued around them and other father-daughter pairs returned to the floor, Connor found himself in the surreal position of making small talk with one of the most powerful women in Seattle. Victoria asked Emma about school, complimented both girls on their dresses, and tried to navigate normal social interaction while clearly struggling with emotions she rarely allowed herself to feel. Connor watched her with fascination and growing respect. This wasn't the cold, calculating businesswoman he'd expected based on office gossip and media portrayals. This was a mother who was clearly drowning in guilt and regret, who was trying desperately to connect with a daughter she'd somehow lost along the way. When the DJ announced the last dance of the evening, Victoria surprised everyone by asking if she could dance with Lily. Connor showed her the basic technique he'd developed, how to move the wheelchair in rhythm with the music, how to encourage Lily's upper body movement while maintaining the connection between them. Watching Victoria dance with Lily, both of them crying and laughing at the same time, Connor felt something profound shift in the gymnasium. This wasn't just about one evening or one dance. This was about a family finding their way back to each other, about walls coming down, about love, finding a way to bridge even the widest gaps. As they prepared to leave, Victoria turned to Connor one more time. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady now, but her eyes still bright with tears. "For seeing her, for making her visible, for giving her something I didn't know how to give." "She was always visible," Connor replied gently. "Sometimes we just need help learning how to look." The drive home was quiet, both Emma and Lily exhausted from the excitement of the evening. But Connor felt a strange energy humming through him, a sense that something fundamental had changed, not just in Lily's life, but in his own. For the first time since losing his engineering career, since becoming invisible himself in the wake of personal and professional loss, Connor felt like he'd contributed something meaningful to the world. Not through complex calculations or technical expertise, but through the simple act of showing up, of seeing someone who needed to be seen. As he tucked Emma into bed and listened to her excited recap of the evening, Connor couldn't shake the feeling that tonight had been the beginning of something much larger than a simple act of kindness. Victoria Chen's gratitude had felt desperate hungry, like someone who'd been starving for connection without realizing it. Tomorrow, Connor thought as he turned off Emma's bedroom light, everything would change. For all of them. Saturday evening arrived with the weight of expectations and anxiety that Connor had been carrying since Victoria's invitation. He stood in front of his bedroom mirror, straightening his tie for the 5th time, trying to calm the nervous energy that had been building all week. His reflection showed a man wearing his only decent dress shirt, pressed, but clearly not expensive, paired with pants that had seen better days. He looked like exactly what he was, a working father who'd bought his clothes at discount stores and wore them carefully to make them last. "Daddy, are you nervous?" Emma asked from his bedroom doorway, wearing her second-best dress and shoes that actually fit her growing feet. A little, Connor admitted. "Sometimes it's intimidating to visit people who have very different lives than we do. But Lily's just Lily," Emma said with the simple wisdom of childhood. "It doesn't matter if her house is big. She's still our friend." Connor knelt down to Emma's level, straightening her collar. "You're absolutely right, Skybug. It's just that sometimes grown-ups worry about things that kids don't worry about. Like what? How to explain class consciousness and social hierarchies to a 7-year-old. How to articulate his fear of being judged, found wanting, dismissed as someone reaching above his station. Like whether we'll fit in, Connor said simply. Whether we'll say the right things or use the right fork. Emma considered this seriously. Well, if we don't know which fork to use, we can just ask. Lily won't mind teaching us. She teaches me about butterflies all the time. The drive to the Chen estate took them through neighborhoods that grew progressively more expensive, the houses larger and more isolated behind gates and landscaping that spoke of serious money. Connor's Honda Civic felt increasingly inadequate, with each mile his anxiety growing as they approached the address Victoria had given him. The Chen residence was even more imposing in daylight. Modern architecture with clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows, the building seemed to float above perfectly manicured grounds. The circular driveway could have accommodated a dozen cars, and the fountain at its center probably cost more than Connor's annual salary. Emma breathed, her face pressed against the passenger window. It's like a museum, Connor parked behind a gleaming BMW that probably cost 3 times what he made in a year, feeling his Civic's rust spots and dented bumper more acutely than ever. This was a mistake. He didn't belong here in this world of wealth and privilege. Whatever Victoria's gratitude about the dance, the reality of their different circumstances would be impossible to ignore in this setting. But before he could change his mind and drive away, the front door opened, and Lily wheeled out, her face bright with excitement. She wore a casual purple sweater and jeans, her hair loose around her shoulders, looking more relaxed than Connor had ever seen her at school. "You're here," she called, wheeling down the accessible ramp with practiced ease. "I've been watching for you for 20 minutes. Victoria appeared behind her, and Connor was surprised to see her in jeans and a simple sweater instead of the power suits he'd grown accustomed to imagining. She looked younger, more approachable, but also nervous in a way that made Connor realize he wasn't the only one feeling out of his depth. "Welcome to our home," Victoria said, her smile genuine but uncertain. "I hope you didn't have trouble finding us. GPS made it easy," Connor replied, helping Emma out of the car and trying to project more confidence than he felt. The inside of the house was as impressive as the exterior, with an open floor plan that seemed to go on forever, artwork that Connor recognized from museum catalogs and furniture that looked too expensive to actually use. But Victoria led them to a more comfortable sitting room with overstuffed chairs and family photos, a space that felt lived in despite its obvious luxury. "I thought we could eat in the kitchen," Victoria said, noticing Connor's discomfort with the formal dining room they passed. "It's more normal." The kitchen was larger than Connor's entire apartment, with granite countertops and professional-grade appliances, but Victoria had clearly made an effort to make it welcoming. The lights were dimmed, candles flickered on the island, and the smell of something delicious filled the air. "I should confess something," Victoria said as they settled around the kitchen island. "I didn't actually cook this. My chef prepared everything before leaving for the weekend, but I did heat it up myself, which for me is a significant culinary achievement." Connor found himself laughing despite his nervousness. Well, heating things up properly is an underrated skill. Dinner was surprisingly comfortable. Victoria asked Emma about school, her artwork, her favorite subjects. Emma, with her natural chattiness, soon had Victoria laughing at stories about her teacher's attempts to explain fractions using pizza. And then Mrs. Rodriguez said that if you eat 3 pieces of an 8-piece pizza, you've eaten 3/8. Emma explained seriously. "But I told her that depends on how the pizza is cut, because if you cut it into really small pieces, 3 pieces might not be very much at all." "That's excellent mathematical thinking," Victoria said, genuinely impressed. "You're questioning assumptions and considering variables. That's what good scientists do." Connor watched this interaction with growing respect for Victoria. She wasn't talking down to Emma or offering the kind of patronizing attention wealthy adults sometimes gave to children. She was engaging with Emma's ideas, seriously treating her 7-year-old logic as worthy of consideration. After dinner, Victoria suggested the girls play in Lily's room while she and Connor had coffee. The suggestion felt orchestrated, deliberate, and Connor found himself alone with one of the most powerful women in Seattle, sitting at her kitchen island, while their daughter's laughter echoed from upstairs. "I want to apologize," Victoria said without preamble, pouring coffee from an expensive-looking machine. "For what?" "For not being there. For hiring someone to take Lily instead of—" Her voice cracked slightly. "Instead of moving heaven and earth to be there myself." Connor accepted the coffee, noting absently that it was probably the best he'd ever tasted. "You were working, providing for her." No, Victoria's voice was sharp, angry at herself. "I was hiding behind mergers and meetings and conference calls because it's easier to throw money at Lily's needs than to sit with the fact that I can't fix her, that no amount of success or wealth will make her walk again." She sat down across from Connor, her carefully maintained composure cracking. "Do you know what I realized last night? When I watched her dance with you and Emma, when I saw her face light up with genuine happiness, I realized I haven't seen her smile like that in— I can't remember how long." Connor stayed quiet, sensing she needed to work through this. "I didn't even know her favorite color was purple?" Victoria continued, her voice thick with guilt. "Purple. She's worn it to every therapy appointment for 3 years, and I never noticed because I was always on my phone, always somewhere else, mentally, even when I was right there, physically." She looked up at Connor, her executive mask completely gone, just a lost mother reaching for understanding. "When Lily showed me her butterfly journal earlier, she told me she works on it during lunch because she doesn't have anyone to sit with. I didn't know she ate lunch alone every day. I ask her about school and she says fine, and I accept it because I'm relieved I don't have to dig deeper." Victoria's hands clenched into fists on the granite countertop. "I'm her mother. I'm supposed to be her whole world, and instead a stranger has given her more joy in 3 weeks than I have in months." "What does that say about me?" Connor moved from his stool to sit beside her, suddenly not caring about the difference in their circumstances. "Pain was pain regardless of wealth. It says you're human," he said gently. "It says you're scared." "Terrified," Victoria whispered. Connor thought carefully before speaking. 3 years ago, I lost my wife in a car accident, hit by a drunk driver on her way home from work. For months afterward, I threw myself into my engineering job trying to outrun the grief. I thought if I just provided for Emma, that would be enough." He paused, the memory still sharp. "But one night, Emma asked me if I was sad because she wasn't a good enough daughter to make me happy." Victoria gasped softly. "That's when I realized Emma didn't need a provider. She needed a dad who was present, who saw her. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, choosing to be fully present when grief was eating me alive, but it's also the best thing I've ever done." "How do I start?" Victoria whispered. "How do I fix this?" "You don't fix it," Connor said. "You just start showing up. Tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. Small steps." They sat in silence for a moment, the expensive kitchen around them fading in importance compared to the very human conversation they were having. "Would you help me?" Victoria asked quietly. Connor met her eyes. "Help you how?" "Not with Lily's medical care. I have excellent people for that. But with learning how to see her, how to be present. I'm good at running companies, terrible at being a mom." She paused. "You're good at this. At seeing people. Would you teach me?" It was an odd request. A billionaire CEO asking a janitor to teach her how to parent her own child. But Connor saw past the wealth and power to the scared mother underneath. "Yeah," he said. "I can do that." Relief flooded Victoria's face. "Thank you. I'll pay you, of course. Whatever rate you think is appropriate for no." Connor's voice was firm. "This isn't a transaction, Victoria. Friends help friends. That's it. Victoria stared at him for a long moment, then smiled through her tears. Friends? I'd like that. The arrangement that developed over the following weeks was unlike anything either Connor or Victoria had experienced. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Connor would arrive at the Chen estate after his shift at school, ostensibly to help with Lily's homework, but really to teach Victoria the art of being present with her daughter. The first session was awkward, with Victoria approaching parenting like a board meeting that needed an agenda and measurable outcomes. She sat across from Lily at the kitchen table, laptop open, ready to take notes on proper engagement techniques. Victoria Connor said gently, "Close the computer. But I want to remember the strategies you're teaching me. The only strategy is this: listen to her. Really listen. Not to respond or fix or offer solutions, but just to understand what she's saying." Victoria looked skeptical but closed the laptop. Connor encouraged her to sit beside Lily instead of across from her to get down to wheelchair level to make their interaction feel collaborative rather than instructional. "Tell your mum about the monarch butterfly project you're working on," Connor suggested. Lily launched into an explanation of butterfly migration patterns, her eyes bright with enthusiasm as she described the incredible 3,000-mile journey from Canada to Mexico. Victoria's first instinct was to ask about the practical applications, the research methods, the scientific implications. "Mom, did you know some butterflies can navigate using the sun's position?" Lily said, her hands moving as she explained. "That's interesting," Victoria replied. "What's the research methodology behind those findings? Have there been peer-reviewed studies?" Connor gently touched Victoria's arm. "Try this instead." "Wow, that's amazing. Tell me more about how they use the sun." Victoria looked confused. "But I want to understand the science behind it. Right now, just understand Lily's excitement about it. The details matter less than her passion." It was a difficult adjustment for someone whose success had come from analyzing data and asking probing questions. Victoria's instinct was to treat every conversation like a problem to be solved, every piece of information as data to be processed and acted upon. But slowly, over multiple sessions, she began to understand what Connor meant. When Lily talked about butterflies, she didn't need her mother to become an expert in Lepidoptera. She needed her mother to see how much the subject meant to her, to share in her wonder, to simply be present with her enthusiasm. The breakthrough came 3 weeks into their arrangement. Victoria arrived home from a particularly difficult board meeting to find Lily in the kitchen with Connor, both of them working on a science fair display about migration patterns. "Mum," Lily called out, "come see what we're building. It shows how monarch butterflies know which direction to fly, even when they've never been to Mexico before." Victoria's first instinct was to check her phone for urgent emails to mentally review the problems from her meeting. But Connor caught her eye and nodded toward Lily, who was practically bouncing with excitement in her wheelchair. Victoria put her phone in her purse without checking it and walked over to the table. "Show me," she said, sitting beside her daughter. For the next hour, Victoria listened as Lily explained butterfly navigation with the passion of a true scientist. She didn't check her phone once, she didn't interrupt with business-minded questions. She just watched her daughter's face light up with joy as she shared something she loved. "That was incredible, baby," Victoria said when Lily finished her explanation. "I had no idea butterflies were such amazing navigators. Did you know," Lily said, her voice soft with wonder, "that they use magnetic fields and the position of the sun and even landmarks to find their way? It's like they have GPS built into their brains." "That's remarkable," Victoria replied, and Connor could hear the genuine awe in her voice. "How did you learn all this?" "I've been reading about it for years," Lily said. "And Connor knows about engineering and physics, so he helps me understand the technical parts." Victoria looked at Connor with something approaching gratitude. "You've been quite the teacher." "Lily's been the teacher," Connor corrected. "I just ask good questions." That night after Connor left and Lily was in bed, Victoria sat in her kitchen with a cup of tea thinking about the evening. For the first time in months, she'd spent an hour focused entirely on her daughter, without thinking about work, without feeling the urge to multitask or optimize the interaction. And it had felt good. Natural even. The changes weren't immediate or dramatic, but they were real. Victoria started leaving work earlier, declining evening meetings when possible. She instituted a no-phone rule during dinner, putting her devices in a drawer so she couldn't be tempted to check them. More importantly, she started really seeing Lily. Not as a problem to be managed or a schedule to be optimized, but as a person with thoughts and feelings and passions worth understanding. "I'm learning something," Victoria told Connor during one of their evening sessions. "I spent so many years trying to provide the best possible life for Lily that I forgot to actually live that life with her." Connor nodded. "I did the same thing after Jennifer died. Work became my escape from grief, but it also became my escape from Emma. It took her asking if she was a bad daughter to make me realize what I was missing." "The fear is still there," Victoria admitted. "The fear that I don't know how to do this, that I'm going to mess it up somehow." "The fear never goes away completely," Connor said. "But it gets easier when you realize that being present is more important than being perfect." Their friendship was helping both of them grow in unexpected ways. Victoria was learning to slow down to value moments over achievements. Connor was regaining confidence in his ability to contribute something meaningful to the world, even if it wasn't through engineering. And Lily was blooming. The lonely, resigned child Connor had first met in the cafeteria was transforming into someone confident, engaged, curious about the world around her. She started participating more in class, making friends, advocating for herself in ways she never had before. "You saved my daughter," Victoria told Connor one evening as they watched Lily and Emma work on an art project together, both girls giggling over their attempts to paint butterflies. "I didn't save anyone," Connor replied. "I just showed up. You're the one doing the hard work of changing." Victoria watched her daughter. Really watched her, seeing the joy in her face as she painted wings in brilliant colors. "I almost lost her," she said quietly. "Not to death or disease, but to my own inability to see what was right in front of me." "But you didn't lose her," Connor pointed out. "You're here now. You're learning. You're showing up. Because you taught me how." Connor looked at Victoria, seeing not the powerful CEO, but the grateful mother, the woman who'd been brave enough to ask for help and vulnerable enough to change. "Friends help friends," he said simply. "That's what we do." Neither of them realized how much their friendship was beginning to mean to each other, or how the foundation they were building through their shared commitment to Lily's happiness was creating something that would soon become much more complicated than either had anticipated. 8 months after the father-daughter dance, Connor's Tuesday and Thursday visits to the Chen estate had evolved into something that felt less like lessons and more like family time. Victoria's transformation as a mother wasn't dramatic, but it was profound. She'd learned to listen without trying to fix to be present, without multitasking to value Lily's emotional needs as much as her physical or educational ones. The breakthrough moments came in small, ordinary instances, like the afternoon Connor arrived to find Victoria and Lily sitting together on the kitchen floor, both covered in flour, laughing over a failed attempt at making butterfly-shaped cookies. "I thought we could surprise you," Victoria said, gesturing helplessly at the floury disaster around them. "But apparently baking is harder than hostile corporate takeovers." "Much harder," Lily agreed solemnly, then dissolved into giggles. "We broke 3 eggs trying to crack them and Mom got eggshell in everything." Connor knelt down beside them, noting how natural Victoria looked, despite the mess how relaxed Lily seemed with her mother's full attention. "Well, the flour-to-kitchen ratio is definitely impressive. Should we try again or just order pizza and call it an art project?" Pizza, both Chen women said simultaneously, then burst into laughter. It was during moments like these that Connor began to see Victoria not as the intimidating CEO from news articles, but as a woman learning to prioritize presence over perfection. She still worked long hours, still commanded meetings with brilliant efficiency, but she'd created space in her life for impromptu baking disasters and butterfly conversations and the simple pleasure of making her daughter laugh. The regular park visits became another cornerstone of their new routine. Every Saturday morning, Connor would arrive with Emma, and they'd all head to Discovery Park or Green Lake, depending on weather and mood. Victoria had initially approached these outings with the same strategic mindset she brought to business, arriving with detailed itineraries and backup plans for every contingency. Victoria, Connor said gently during their third park visit, watching her check her phone for the weather update for the fifth time. Sometimes the best plans are no plans. But what if it rains? What if Lily gets tired? What if the accessible restrooms are closed for maintenance? Then we adapt, Connor said simply. We find shelter, we take breaks, we solve problems as they come up. That's what makes it an adventure. Learning to embrace uncertainty was perhaps Victoria's greatest challenge. Her business success had come from controlling variables, minimizing risks, having contingency plans for every possible scenario. But parenting Connor helped her understand was about adapting to constant uncertainty with grace and flexibility. The Saturday when Emma decided to teach Lily how to skip rocks at Green Lake became a perfect example. Victoria's initial instinct was to worry about Lily's balance near the water, about the potential for wet clothes, about whether rock skipping was an appropriate activity for someone in a wheelchair. But Connor encouraged her to just watch, to let the girls figure it out themselves. What they discovered was that Lily had incredible upper body strength and precision. While she couldn't stand to throw rocks, she could launch them from her chair with surprising accuracy and distance. "Look, Mom," Lily called out as her stone skipped 4 times across the lake surface. "I'm really good at this." Victoria sat on the grass beside Connor, watching her daughter's face glow with accomplishment. "I would have said it was too dangerous," she admitted quietly. "I would have found 12 reasons why she couldn't do it. Fear makes us want to protect them from everything," Connor replied. But sometimes protection becomes limitation. The evolution of their Saturday routines reflected Victoria's growing confidence as a hands-on parent. They graduated from carefully planned activities to spontaneous adventures. Wandering through Pike Place Market, feeding ducks at the University of Washington Quad, even attempting to fly kites at Golden Gardens Beach despite Connor's complete lack of kite-flying expertise. "Why is it going in circles?" Emma demanded, watching their butterfly-shaped kite spiral wildly through the air. "Because your dad is an engineer, not a pilot." Victoria laughed, trying to untangle the kite string. "We're scientifically defeating the laws of aerodynamics. Maybe we should stick to ground-based activities," Connor suggested as their kite crashed into a nearby tree. "Never," Lily declared dramatically. "We're going to master this kite, and then we're going to teach it proper butterfly migration patterns." Watching the girls work together to rescue their wayward kite, Connor felt something profound settle in his chest. This felt like family. Not the family he'd planned or expected, but the family they'd built through patience, presence, and the simple decision to show up for each other consistently. Victoria seemed to be feeling something similar. Connor caught her watching him during quiet moments, her expression thoughtful and soft, in a way that made his heart skip unexpectedly. When their hands brushed while setting up the picnic blanket, neither pulled away immediately. When she laughed at his terrible jokes about aerodynamics, her smile lingered on him longer than casual friendships usually warranted. But neither was ready to acknowledge what was growing between them. The foundation of their relationship was built on Lily's needs and Victoria's growth as a mother. Anything else felt complicated, potentially dangerous to the delicate balance they'd achieved. The first hint of romantic tension surfaced during a quiet evening in October. The girls were working on a joint art project in Lily's room, their voices carrying down the stairs as they debated color choices for butterfly wings. Connor and Victoria sat in the kitchen sharing a bottle of wine while reviewing Lily's latest school reports. Her math scores have improved dramatically, Victoria noted, scanning the papers. And her teacher says she's becoming a leader in group projects. She's gained confidence, Connor observed. When kids feel valued at home, it shows up everywhere else. Victoria looked at him over the rim of her wine glass, her dark eyes reflecting the soft kitchen lighting. You know, I used to think success meant climbing higher, achieving more, building bigger and better things. But watching Lily bloom this year, I'm starting to think success might mean something completely different. What do you think it means now? Connor asked, genuinely curious. Maybe it means being present for the people who matter most. Maybe it means creating moments like this where your daughter feels safe enough to laugh loudly and argue about butterfly colors with her best friend. Connor felt his chest tighten with emotion. Victoria, you've become an amazing mother. The woman I met at that dance, so afraid of failing Lily, she's transformed into someone who puts her daughter's happiness above everything else. I had a good teacher, Victoria said softly, her eyes holding his. The moment stretched between them charged with possibility and unspoken feelings. Connor found himself leaning slightly forward, drawn by the warmth in Victoria's expression, by the way the soft lighting made her look younger, more vulnerable. But before anything could happen, Emma's voice called down from upstairs. Dad, Connor, come see what we made. The spell broke, and both adults sat back, suddenly aware of the dangerous territory they'd been approaching. We should, Victoria began. Yeah, Connor agreed quickly. We should see what they've created. They climbed the stairs together, careful not to touch both of them, acutely aware of the shift that had just occurred. Whatever was growing between them was becoming harder to ignore, and both of them knew it. Upstairs they found the girls surrounded by painted paper butterflies, each one unique and beautiful. The art project had turned into an installation covering most of Lily's bedroom floor. It's a butterfly sanctuary, Lily explained proudly. Each butterfly represents a different species we've studied. Emma painted the monarchs and I did the swallowtails. It's incredible, Victoria said, her voice still slightly breathless from the moment they'd shared downstairs. Connor knelt down to examine the butterflies more closely, grateful for the distraction from whatever had almost happened in the kitchen. The detail is amazing. You even got the wing patterns right. As they admired the girls' artwork and listened to their enthusiastic explanations of butterfly characteristics, Connor found himself stealing glances at Victoria. She was kneeling beside Lily's wheelchair, asking genuine questions about color choices and artistic techniques, completely engaged with their daughter's project. This was what he'd helped her learn: how to be present, how to value the moment over the schedule, how to see Lily's interests as worthy of adult attention and respect. But somewhere along the way, Connor had begun to see Victoria differently too. Not as the intimidating CEO who needed lessons in parenting, but as a woman who'd been brave enough to change, vulnerable enough to ask for help, strong enough to prioritize love over ambition. The realization terrified him. The romantic tension that had surfaced that evening in Victoria's kitchen became increasingly difficult to ignore over the following weeks. Connor found himself looking forward to their Tuesday and Thursday visits, with an anticipation that had little to do with helping Lily and everything to do with seeing Victoria's smile when he walked through the door. Victoria, for her part, began finding excuses to extend their time together. What had been 2-hour sessions focused on parenting strategies evolved into longer evenings that stretched past the girls' bedtimes, filled with conversations about everything from childhood memories to dreams for the future. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. The way Victoria's hand lingered when she passed Connor a cup of coffee. The way Connor's eyes followed her movements around the kitchen. The comfortable silences that felt charged with possibility, and the careful distance they maintained despite wanting to be closer. It was Emma who finally voiced what both adults were trying not to acknowledge. "Dad," she said one evening as Connor tucked her into bed after a particularly long visit to the Chen estate. "Do you like Miss Victoria?" Connor felt his heart stutter. "Of course I like her, Skybug. She's our friend." "No, I mean, do you like her like you liked Mummy?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Connor sat on the edge of Emma's bed trying to find words that were both honest and age-appropriate. "Why do you ask?" he said finally. "Because you smile different when you talk to her. And she smiles different when you're around too. And when you're both looking at me, and Lily, sometimes you look at each other instead and your faces get all—" Emma scrunched up her features in an exaggerated expression of smitten confusion. Connor couldn't help but laugh despite his discomfort. "Do we really look like that?" "Like cartoon characters with hearts for eyes," Emma confirmed solemnly. "So, do you?" Connor took a breath. "I care about Miss Victoria very much. But it's complicated, sweetheart. Sometimes adults have feelings that are difficult to figure out. Because she's rich, and we're not." The blunt question surprised Connor. "Is that what you think Madison's mum said rich people and regular people don't usually be together? She said it's because they live in different worlds." Connor felt a surge of anger at the casual prejudice embedded in that statement, but also a recognition of its truth. The class differences between him and Victoria weren't just about money. They represented completely different social contexts, different expectations, different pressures. "Madison's mom is wrong about some things," Connor said carefully. "But you're right that Miss Victoria and I live very different lives. That doesn't mean we can't be friends, but it might mean other things would be challenging. But you do like her." Emma pressed with the persistence of a child who knew she'd identified something important. Connor looked at his daughter, this perceptive 7-year-old, who saw through adult pretenses with uncomfortable accuracy. "Yeah, Skybug," he admitted quietly. "I do." The conversation with Emma forced Connor to confront feelings he'd been trying to suppress. He was falling for Victoria Chen, billionaire CEO mother to his daughter's best friend woman, so far out of his league that the situation felt almost absurd. But it wasn't just attraction. Over the months of their friendship, he'd watched Victoria transform from a distant workaholic into a present, engaged mother. He'd seen her vulnerability beneath the professional competence, her humor beneath the serious exterior, her genuine kindness beneath the intimidating wealth. The problem was that acknowledging these feelings opened up a world of complications that Connor wasn't sure he was ready to handle. Those complications became painfully apparent the following week, when Connor arrived at the Chen estate to find Victoria in the kitchen with a man in an expensive suit, their heads bent over documents spread across the island. "Connor." "Perfect timing," Victoria said, looking up with a smile that seemed slightly forced. "This is Richard Blackwood, one of my board members. Richard, this is Connor Mitchell, the friend I've mentioned, who's been helping with Lily." Richard's handshake was firm, professional, and came with an assessing look that made Connor immediately conscious of his janitor's uniform and calloused hands. The custodian Richard said, not quite making it a question. The engineer Connor corrected politely but firmly. "I work custodial at Lily's school." "How fortunate that you've been able to help with childcare arrangements." Richard continued, his tone carefully neutral, but carrying unmistakable undertones. "It's so challenging for working parents to find reliable support." Connor felt the careful dismissal in the man's words, the assumption that he was hired help rather than a friend. Worse, he could see Victoria's discomfort with the interaction, her obvious struggle between defending Connor and maintaining professional relationships. "Connor isn't childcare," Victoria said firmly. "He's family." The word hung in the air like a declaration, surprising all three of them with its weight and implication. "Family," Richard repeated thoughtfully. "How modern." After Richard left, Victoria and Connor stood in her kitchen, both of them aware that something fundamental had shifted with that one word. "I'm sorry about that," Victoria said quietly. "Richard is traditional in his views about appropriate professional relationships." "Is that what this is?" Connor asked, his voice careful. "A professional relationship." Victoria met his eyes, and Connor saw the same confusion and longing there that he felt in his own chest. "I don't know what this is," she admitted, "but when he talked about you like you were someone I hired, like you weren't—" She stopped struggling with words. "You're not my employee, Connor. You're not hired help. You're the person who saved my relationship with my daughter. You're the person I talk to when I'm scared or confused or happy. I'm what Connor asked softly. "You're the person I think about when I wake up in the morning, and the person I miss when you're not here," Victoria whispered. The confession hung between them like a bridge they could either cross or burn. Connor felt his heart hammering against his ribs, every rational thought in his head screaming that this was impossible, while every emotion in his chest insisted it was inevitable. "Victoria," he said, his voice rough with longing and fear. "I know it's crazy," she continued, the words tumbling out now that the dam had broken. "I know people will think I'm slumming or you're gold-digging or that it's some kind of inappropriate power dynamic. I know we live in different worlds and face different pressures and have completely different responsibilities." She stepped closer, close enough that Connor could smell her perfume, see the vulnerability in her dark eyes. "But I also know that I haven't been this happy in years. That when you smile at me, it feels like the sun coming up. That when you're not here, the house feels empty, even when it's full of people." Connor's hands found her shoulders, steadying both of them as the weight of mutual confession settled around them. "This is terrifying," he said honestly. "You're brilliant and successful and powerful, and I'm a janitor trying to rebuild his life. People will question your judgment. They'll assume I'm using you. I don't care what people think," Victoria interrupted fiercely. "I care what you think. I care what I feel. And I care about building something real with someone who sees me, not my bank account or my company or my public image." Connor looked at this woman who'd become so important to him, who'd trusted him with her vulnerabilities and invited him into her family's most precious moments. The woman who'd learned to prioritize presence over productivity, love over ambition, connection over control. "Are you sure?" he asked, giving her one last chance to step back from the precipice they were approaching. "Really sure. Because once we cross this line, everything changes." "Everything already has changed," Victoria said softly. "The question is whether we're brave enough to acknowledge it." Connor's answer was to pull her closer and kiss her soft and careful at first, then deeper as months of suppressed feelings poured out between them. She tasted like possibility and risk and the kind of love that could either save them or destroy everything they'd built. When they broke apart, both breathless Victoria rested her forehead against his. "What happens now?" she whispered. "Now we figure it out together," Connor said, his voice steady, despite the chaos of emotions in his chest. "One day at a time." Neither of them realized that their first kiss had been witnessed by a photographer with a telephoto lens, or that by morning their private moment would become very public news that would test their newfound relationship in ways they couldn't imagine. Connor learned about the photographs the same way most of Seattle did, scrolling through news websites during his lunch break at school. The headline made his stomach drop: "Tech Billionaire Victoria Chen's Secret Romance Charity Case," or "Love Story." The photos were invasive, taken through the Chen estate's large windows, with telephoto lenses that captured their first kiss in intimate detail. Accompanying articles speculated about Victoria's unusual choice and questioned Connor's motives, painting their relationship as either a publicity stunt or an example of a working-class man taking advantage of a vulnerable, wealthy woman. Connor's phone buzzed constantly as the story gained traction on social media and news outlets. Most calls he ignored, but when Principal Harrison's name appeared, he knew he had to answer. "Connor." "We need to talk," she said without preamble. "Can you come to my office during your afternoon break?" The meeting was worse than Connor had anticipated. Principal Harrison sat behind her desk with several school district officials, their expressions ranging from uncomfortable to openly hostile. "Connor, I'm sure you understand our position," Principal Harrison began. "The school district has policies about appropriate relationships between staff and parents, especially when there are significant economic disparities involved." "Are you suggesting I did something inappropriate?" Connor asked, his voice carefully controlled, despite the anger building in his chest. "We're suggesting that the appearance of impropriety can be as damaging as actual impropriety," one of the district officials said. "Parents are expressing concerns about your motivations, about whether you've used your position to gain access to a wealthy family for personal benefit." "My position is custodial," Connor said flatly. "I empty trash cans and mop floors. I met Lily because she was sitting alone in the cafeteria, forgotten. I developed a friendship with her mother because she asked for help learning how to be present with her daughter. At no point did I seek personal gain. Nevertheless," the official continued, "the perception has created a distraction that's affecting the school environment. Students are asking teachers about the news stories. Parents are questioning our judgment in employing you, and frankly, some board members are concerned about the district's reputation." Connor felt the familiar weight of being judged for circumstances beyond his control, for having the audacity to care about people outside his assigned social class. "What are you asking me to do?" he said quietly. "We think it would be best if you took some time off." Principal Harrison said, her tone genuinely regretful. "Let the attention die down, allow people to focus on education rather than gossip. You're suspending me for falling in love. We're giving you paid leave to resolve a situation that's becoming disruptive to our educational mission." The official corrected. "Your employment isn't terminated, but your presence here has become problematic." Connor felt the irony like a physical weight. He'd been invisible at this school for months, a background figure that students and staff barely noticed. Now suddenly he was too visible, too noteworthy, too much of a distraction for simply being human. That afternoon he picked up Emma from school to find her subdued and confused. "Madison's mom asked me weird questions today," Emma said as they walked to the car. "About whether you're trying to marry Miss Victoria for her money." "What does that mean?" Connor knelt down to Emma's level, his heart breaking at the innocence in her questions. Some people think that when someone with less money cares about someone with more money, it must be fake. They think the only reason someone like me would care about someone like Miss Victoria is to get her money. "But that's dumb," Emma said with the clear logic of childhood. "You liked her before you even knew she was rich. You liked her because she was learning how to be a good mom to Lily. I know that, and you know that, but some people want to believe the worst about others. It makes them feel better about themselves." Meanwhile, across town, Victoria was dealing with her own professional crisis. The photographs had appeared in the business section of every major newspaper, accompanied by speculation about her judgment, her fitness as a CEO, and the impact of her personal distractions on company performance. Her assistant buzzed her intercom. "Ms. Chen, the board is requesting an emergency meeting for 4 p.m. Victoria closed her eyes, knowing exactly what was coming. The 12 members of Chen Technologies' board of directors filed into the conference room with expressions that ranged from concerned to openly critical. "Victoria, we need to discuss the impact of recent publicity on company image and stock performance," Richard Blackwood began without preamble. "Since the photographs appeared this morning, our stock price has dropped 3%, and we've received numerous calls from investors expressing concern about your judgment. My personal life has no bearing on my ability to run this company," Victoria said, her CEO voice steady, despite the turmoil in her chest. Your personal life became the company's business the moment it appeared in every major newspaper. Another board member said. Our shareholders are questioning whether someone who makes such questionable personal decisions can be trusted with their investments. Questionable decisions. Victoria's voice carried a warning edge. You mean falling in love with a good man who happens to earn less money than I do? We mean engaging in a relationship that appears exploitative regardless of its actual nature, Richard continued. The optics are terrible, Victoria. A billionaire CEO and a school janitor. It looks like either a publicity stunt or evidence of serious judgment issues. Victoria felt rage building in her chest, not just at their dismissive attitude toward Connor, but at their assumption that love must be calculated, that human connections must make economic sense to be valid. Connor Mitchell is the man who taught my daughter to believe she was worth seeing. He's the man who taught me how to be present with her. He's kind, intelligent, principled, and one of the finest people I've ever met. If the board has a problem with my choice to love someone based on character rather than net worth, perhaps the problem isn't with my judgment. Perhaps not, Richard said carefully. But it's certainly a problem for the company. We've scheduled a press conference for tomorrow morning to address investor concerns. We suggest you either end this relationship publicly or consider taking a leave of absence until the situation resolves itself. The ultimatum hung in the air like a sword. Victoria looked around the table at these men and women who'd worked with her for years, who'd benefited from her leadership and vision, who were now asking her to choose between love and livelihood. I need time to consider your recommendation, Victoria said finally. Of course. But Victoria Richards' voice carried a note of finality. This isn't just about optics anymore. It's about fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. We can't allow personal relationships to damage company value indefinitely. That evening, Victoria sat in her kitchen with Connor and both girls, all of them trying to pretend their world wasn't falling apart around them. The good news, Connor said, attempting levity while helping Lily with homework, is that I'm now the most famous janitor in Seattle. The bad news is that it's for all the wrong reasons. It's not fair, Lily said fiercely, her young voice carrying surprising anger. You're the best person we know. Why are people being so mean? Because sometimes people are scared of things that don't fit their expectations, Victoria explained gently. And sometimes people who don't know how to love anyone judge people who do. Emma looked up from her coloring book. Are you going to stop being friends because of the mean people? The question hit both adults like a physical blow. Connor reached for Victoria's hand across the table, their fingers intertwining with desperate determination. Never, Victoria said firmly, looking directly at Connor. Some things are more important than what other people think. But even as she said the words, both of them could feel the pressure mounting. Connor's job was threatened, Victoria's career was under attack, and their children were being forced to navigate adult prejudices they shouldn't have to understand. The foundation they'd built over months of friendship and growing love was being tested by forces beyond their control, and neither of them was sure it would be strong enough to survive. The crisis hit on a Tuesday morning in November when Victoria was 30,000 feet over the Pacific Ocean, flying to Tokyo for merger negotiations that couldn't be postponed. Connor was at home with Emma officially on paid leave from the school district, while the media attention supposedly died down when his phone rang with a call that would change everything. Mr. Mitchell. The voice was professional, urgent. This is Janet Rodriguez at Riverside Elementary. Lily Chen has had a medical emergency. She's being transported to Children's Hospital, and we need you to meet them there. Connor's blood turned cold. What happened? Where's her mother? Ms. Chen is unreachable currently in transit overseas. You're listed as Lily's emergency contact after her mother. The paramedics said it appears to be a seizure. Connor's hands shook as he gathered Emma's coat and backpack. Lily had never had seizures before. Her cerebral palsy didn't typically involve neurological complications which made this terrifying and unpredictable. The drive to the hospital felt endless. Emma sat quietly in her car seat, sensing the gravity of the situation without fully understanding it. "Is Lily going to be okay, Daddy?" she asked in a small voice. "I don't know, sweetheart," Connor admitted, unable to lie to her. "But we're going to be there for her no matter what." At the hospital, Connor found controlled chaos. Lily was conscious but groggy, surrounded by medical equipment and nurses monitoring her vital signs. When she saw Connor, her face crumpled with relief. "Connor," she whispered, reaching for his hand. "I was so scared." "Where's my mom?" "She's on her way," Connor said, hoping it was true. "I'm here, okay? Emma's here. You're not alone." The next hours passed in a blur of medical consultations and worried waiting. The seizure appeared to be an isolated incident, possibly triggered by stress and changes in medication, but doctors wanted to keep Lily for observation and run additional tests. Connor called Victoria's assistant, her personal phone, her hotel in Tokyo, leaving increasingly desperate messages as the hours passed without response. The frustration of being unable to reach Lily's mother while making medical decisions he wasn't legally authorized to make added another layer of anxiety to an already terrifying situation. It was nearly midnight Tokyo time when Victoria finally called back, her voice tight with panic. "Connor, what happened?" "Is she okay? I'm trying to get a flight back, but the earliest I can leave is tomorrow morning." Connor filled her in on the medical details while watching Lily sleep fitfully in the hospital bed. Emma curled up in a chair beside her, refusing to leave her friend. "She keeps asking for you," Connor said gently. "The doctors say she's stable, but she's scared, and she needs her mom." "I know," Victoria's voice cracked with guilt and frustration. "I'm cancelling everything. I'll be on the first flight out." "Victoria, about the merger." "I don't care about the merger," Victoria said fiercely. "I don't care about any of it. My daughter is in the hospital, and I'm not there. Nothing else matters." 14 hours later, Victoria burst through the hospital room door, still wearing her business suit. From the cancelled meetings, her hair disheveled from the long flight, her face drawn with exhaustion and worry. "Baby," she whispered, rushing to Lily's bedside. "Mummy's here. I'm so sorry I wasn't here sooner." Lily burst into tears, reaching for her mother with desperate relief. "Mom, I thought something really bad was happening. The doctors kept asking questions I didn't know how to answer, and Connor was there, but I wanted you." Victoria held her daughter while crying herself, whispering apologies and reassurances. Connor watched the reunion with profound relief, but also with growing awareness of how this crisis had revealed the fundamental impossibility of their situation. Victoria was one of the most powerful business leaders in Seattle, with responsibilities that literally spanned the globe. Connor was a man whose job and community had already been disrupted by their relationship. When crisis hit, the practical realities of their different lives became unavoidably clear. Later, as Lily slept peacefully with her mother sitting guard beside her bed, Connor and Victoria finally had a chance to talk in the hospital hallway. "Thank you, Victoria," said her voice, thick with emotion. "For being there when I couldn't, for staying with her, for making medical decisions, for—" She gestured helplessly. "For being the parent I should have been." "You were halfway around the world for work," Connor said gently. "You couldn't have known this would happen." "But I could have not gone," Victoria replied. "I could have sent someone else, delegated the negotiations. I chose to prioritize business over being available for my daughter, and when she needed me most, a stranger had to step in." Connor winced at the word stranger, though he understood her meaning. Legally, medically, practically, that's what he was. He had no official relationship to Lily, no legal right to make decisions about her care, no real authority beyond what Victoria had informally granted him. The board is furious about the cancelled merger. Victoria continued. Richard called 3 times during my flight to remind me how much money I cost the company by walking away from negotiations. Apparently, my personal crisis reflects poorly on my commitment to shareholder interests. And what did you tell him? I told him that any board member who thinks a mother shouldn't prioritize her child's medical emergency over profit margins can find himself a new CEO, Victoria said with fierce determination. Connor felt a surge of admiration for her strength, but also growing dread about the impossible position she was being put in. Victoria, you can't keep choosing between your daughter and your career. It's not sustainable. I know, she said quietly, and I can't keep depending on you to fill the gaps in my presence. It's not fair to you, to Emma, or to Lily. You have your own life, your own responsibilities. They stood in the hospital hallway, both of them recognizing the weight of what was being left unsaid. The crisis had revealed the fundamental incompatibility of their circumstances. Victoria's global responsibilities meant she would inevitably face more situations where she couldn't be immediately available for Lily. Connor's uncertain employment status meant he couldn't be relied upon as a permanent solution. "What are we going to do?" Victoria asked, her voice small and uncertain. Connor reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers with gentle desperation. "We're going to figure it out," he said, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. "Together." But both of them could feel the foundation of their relationship cracking under pressures they couldn't control or eliminate. Love, they were learning, wasn't always enough to overcome practical impossibilities. The conversation that changed everything happened in Victoria's kitchen 3 days after Lily was discharged from the hospital. Connor had just finished helping Lily with her homework, while Victoria prepared dinner, both adults moving around each other with careful choreography that spoke of growing intimacy and shared purpose. "I made a decision," Victoria said, suddenly setting down her wine glass with deliberate precision. Connor looked up from where he was helping Emma with art supplies, sensing the weight in her words. "I'm stepping down as CEO of Chen Technologies." The statement landed like a bomb in the peaceful kitchen. Lily and Emma looked up from their projects, sensing adult tension without understanding its source. Victoria Connor said carefully, "That's a huge decision." "Are you sure I've never been more certain of anything in my life?" Victoria replied, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was saying. "The board made it clear that they consider my relationship with you a liability. They want me to choose between love and leadership. So I'm choosing love." Connor felt his heart racing with panic and admiration in equal measure. "You can't give up your life's work for me. For us. I won't let you sacrifice everything you've built." "I'm not sacrificing anything," Victoria said firmly. "I'm realigning my priorities based on what I've learned about what actually matters. The company will survive without me. Lily won't get another childhood, and I won't get another chance to be present for it." She moved to sit beside Connor at the kitchen island, taking his hands in hers. "These past months with you, learning how to really see Lily, building something real with someone who values presence over productivity. It's shown me that I've been measuring success all wrong. Real success isn't about stock prices or market share. It's about this." She gestured toward their daughters happily working on their art projects. "It's about building a life where the people you love feel valued and seen and prioritized." Connor stared at her, overwhelmed by the enormity of her decision and the love behind it. "But Victoria, your financial security, your independence—" "We'll be fine," she interrupted. "I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. What I don't have enough of is time with the people I love. What I've been missing is the simple pleasure of being fully present for ordinary moments that turn out to be extraordinary." That same evening, Connor made his own life-changing decision. He called his former engineering colleague, David Santos, who'd been encouraging him to apply for a position at Boeing's Seattle facility. "David, it's Connor Mitchell. Is that senior structural engineer position still available?" Connor: "Yeah, absolutely. I've been hoping you'd call. Your experience with aerospace composites is exactly what we need. Can you interview next week?" "I can interview tomorrow if necessary," Connor said, feeling something shift inside him. "It's time I stopped hiding from who I used to be." The job interview went better than Connor had dared to hope. His years away from engineering had actually given him perspective that many candidates lacked. He could speak to the practical challenges of implementation, the importance of clear communication across departments, the value of attention to detail in safety-critical structures. "We're impressed," the hiring manager said. "Your approach to problem-solving shows both technical depth and practical wisdom. When can you start?" 2 weeks, Connor said, hardly believing his good fortune. "I need to give proper notice at my current position." That evening, he found Victoria in her garden, watching Lily and Emma play together on the accessible playground equipment Victoria had installed months earlier. "I got the engineering job," he said, sitting beside her on the garden bench. Victoria turned to him with a smile that could have powered the entire city. "Connor, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you." "I'm proud of us," Connor replied. "You're stepping into authentic leadership of your own life, and I'm reclaiming professional confidence I thought I'd lost forever." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughters play in the fading autumn light. The media attention was finally beginning to die down, replaced by newer scandals and fresher gossip. Connor's suspension from the school district would end with his resignation, and Victoria's board of directors would have to find fault with someone else's personal choices. "Are you scared?" Victoria asked quietly. "Terrified," Connor admitted. "But also more hopeful than I've been in years. We're both walking away from situations that weren't serving us toward something we're building together. The girls seem happy about our decision to make this official," Victoria observed, watching Emma push Lily's wheelchair in loops around the garden path while both of them laughed. Connor had been amazed by how naturally both children had accepted the news that their parents were planning a life together. Emma's primary concern had been whether Lily would be her sister for real now, while Lily had asked if this meant Connor would be at all her school events from now on. "They've been a family in their hearts longer than we've been willing to admit it with our words," Connor said. Victoria leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Connor." "Mitchell, not despite our different backgrounds, but because of everything we've learned from building a bridge between our worlds. I love you too, Victoria Chen, for your courage, your growth, your willingness to prioritize love over everything else." As the stars began to appear in the Seattle sky, they made plans for a future that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Victoria would transition to philanthropic work focusing on accessibility advocacy and educational equity. Connor would rebuild his engineering career with the confidence that came from knowing his worth wasn't defined by job titles or salary figures. Most importantly, they would build a family that honored both children's memories of lost parents while creating new traditions and connections that were entirely their own. The foundation they'd built through months of friendship crisis and growth was strong enough to support the weight of their love and the complexity of their combined lives. They'd proven that with patience, presence, and commitment to seeing each other clearly, even the most unlikely connections could grow into something beautiful and lasting. The garden behind the Chen estate had been transformed into something that looked like a fairy tale. White roses climbed trellises that framed a natural altar, while string lights twinkled between the mature oak trees like captured stars. Chairs arranged in intimate rows faced the space where Victoria and Connor would exchange vows, surrounded by the people who mattered most in their carefully rebuilt lives. Connor stood at the altar in his best suit, the one Victoria had insisted on buying him for the occasion, his hand steady despite the magnitude of the moment. Beside him, Emma bounced slightly on her toes in her lavender flower girl dress, barely containing her excitement. "She's going to be so pretty, Daddy," Emma whispered, peeking around Connor to watch for Victoria's appearance. The guests were an eclectic mix that perfectly represented the bridge Connor and Victoria had built between their worlds. Mrs. Patterson sat in the front row next to Connor's engineering colleagues from Boeing, while Victoria's philanthropist friends mingled easily with teachers from Riverside Elementary. The gathering proved that love could create community across any social divide when people were willing to see past surface differences. When the music began and Lily appeared at the end of the garden path, Connor's breath caught. She wore a dress that perfectly matched Emma's, her wheelchair decorated with white roses that made her look like a princess from a beautiful dream. But it was her confidence that stopped Connor's heart. The shy, invisible girl he'd first met in the school cafeteria had been replaced by someone radiant with self-assurance and joy. "Look, everyone," Lily announced as she rolled down the aisle, her voice carrying clearly across the garden. "I'm the maid of honor, and Emma's the flower girl, and together we're making sure our parents get married properly." Laughter rippled through the gathering, warm and affectionate. Lily positioned her wheelchair beside the altar with practiced precision, then looked expectantly toward the back of the garden. Victoria appeared in the archway, and Connor forgot how to breathe. She wore a simple white dress that skimmed her ankles, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, her face glowing with happiness that made her look decades younger. But what struck Connor most was how relaxed she looked, how present and unhurried, despite the magnitude of the occasion. The Victoria walking toward him was completely different from the stressed CEO he'd first met at that father-daughter dance. This woman had learned to prioritize moments over meetings, presence over productivity, love over all the external measures of success that had once defined her. As she reached him and took his hands, Victoria whispered just loud enough for the children to hear, "Ready to make this official?" "I've been ready since the night you taught me to dance," Connor replied, referring not to their wedding preparation, but to the emotional dance they'd learned together over months of building trust and understanding. The ceremony itself was brief but profound. Their vows, written separately but somehow perfectly complementary, spoke not of fairy tale romance, but of mature love built on shared values and mutual growth. "Connor," Victoria said, her voice steady, despite tears in her eyes. "You taught me that being seen is more important than being impressive. That showing up matters more than standing out. That love isn't about finding someone perfect, but about choosing to grow together into the people we're meant to become." Connor's vows were equally heartfelt. "Victoria, you showed me that second chances aren't just possible, they're necessary for real living. That courage looks like vulnerability, that strength shows up as willingness to change, and that the most important engineering I'll ever do is building a life where love comes first." When the officiant pronounced them married, both children cheered so loudly that their voices echoed off the surrounding trees. As Connor and Victoria kissed, sealing their commitment to each other and to the family they'd consciously created, Emma and Lily hugged each other with the pure joy of children whose biggest dream was coming true. The reception continued in the garden as evening fell and the string lights created a magical atmosphere. Connor danced with both daughters, spinning them around the temporary dance floor, while other guests looked on with approving smiles. Victoria, who had once been too busy for school events, now led a conga line that included everyone from her former board members to the hospital staff who'd cared for Lily during her medical emergency. "I can't believe this is real," Victoria said, during a quiet moment when she and Connor stole a few minutes alone beside the rose garden. "Which part?" Connor asked, pulling her closer. "All of it. The fact that I'm married to my best friend. The fact that our children are so happy they're literally glowing. The fact that I feel more myself than I have in decades." Connor looked across the garden where Emma was teaching Lily an elaborate clapping game, while other children gathered around to learn. A year ago, I was invisible, forgotten, convinced my best days were behind me. Now I'm married to the most amazing woman I've ever met. I have work that challenges and fulfills me, and I get to be dad to not just one incredible kid, but two. 3 years into their marriage, the Mitchell-Chen household had settled into rhythms that felt both intentional and natural. Sunday mornings found them in their expanded kitchen, the space Victoria had renovated to accommodate Connor's love of cooking and their children's need for homework space. Emma, now 10, sat at the island working on a science project about renewable energy, while Lily, 12, and increasingly confident, sketched butterflies between bites of Connor's famous pancakes. "Dad, can you help me understand how solar panels work?" Emma asked, looking up from her poster board covered in careful diagrams. "Actually, ask Mom." Connor suggested flipping pancakes while Victoria fed their 8-month-old son Jamie. She knows more about renewable energy technology than I do. Victoria had indeed found her calling in philanthropic work, specifically focusing on sustainable technology access for underserved communities. Her foundation had funded solar installations in dozens of schools and community centers, bringing both environmental benefits and practical education to areas that had been overlooked by traditional development. The basic principle is photovoltaic conversion. Victoria explained to Emma, easily shifting between mother and educator modes. The panels contain silicon cells that convert sunlight directly into electrical current. "Would you like to see the demonstration kit I brought home from last week's school visit?" Watching Victoria engage with their children's intellectual curiosity. Connor marveled at how completely she'd transformed from the distracted CEO he'd first met. These days she worked reasonable hours, never traveled without extensive planning around family needs, and had become the kind of hands-on mother who knew every teacher's name and attended every school event. "Lily, show Dad your drawing." Emma encouraged, always eager to showcase her sister's artistic talents. Lily turned her sketchbook around to reveal a detailed monarch butterfly with wings that seemed to flutter right off the page. But what struck Connor was the background of her drawing a family of butterflies flying together in formation, each one unique but clearly part of the same journey. "It's beautiful, Butterfly Girl," Connor said, using the nickname that had followed them from those early cafeteria conversations. "What inspired this one? I've been thinking about migration patterns," Lily said seriously. "How butterflies that have never been somewhere before still know how to find their way home. I think families are kind of like that too. We find our way to where we belong, even when the path isn't obvious." Victoria and Connor exchanged a look over baby Jamie's head, both of them struck by their daughter's wisdom. Lily had indeed found her way to confidence and belonging, but not without continued challenges. Her cerebral palsy required ongoing physical therapy. She sometimes faced accessibility barriers at school events, and she occasionally dealt with thoughtless comments from other kids. But the Lily of today bore little resemblance to the isolated child Connor had first encountered. She was president of her school's environmental club, had published 2 articles about butterfly conservation in junior science journals, and served as a peer mentor for other students with disabilities. Her transformation was complete not because her challenges had disappeared, but because she'd learned to see herself as someone valuable and capable rather than someone to be overlooked. "Speaking of migration," Victoria said, settling Jamie in his high chair, "Lily has news about next year. I got accepted to the Marine Biology Summer Program at the University of Washington." Lily announced, her face bright with pride. "I'll be the youngest student they've ever admitted, and I get to work with real researchers studying Puget Sound ecosystems." Connor felt tears prick his eyes. The little girl who had once eaten lunch alone, convinced she was invisible, would be conducting actual scientific research alongside university professors. "I'm so proud of you," he said, hugging her carefully. "Dr. Lily Chen Mitchell has a nice ring to it." The hyphenated name had been Lily's choice when Victoria and Connor married. She'd wanted to honor both families while creating something new that belonged to all of them. Emma had made the same choice, delighting in the way their long family name reflected their complex but loving origins. Their Sunday morning was interrupted by the sound of the doorbell, followed by familiar voices in the entryway. Connor's neighbor from his old apartment, Mrs. Patterson, appeared in the kitchen carrying a casserole dish and wearing a smile that could power the house. "I brought lunch for the family," she announced, setting the dish on the counter. "And I wanted to see how Jamie's doing with his new tooth." Mrs. Patterson had become honorary grandmother to all 3 children, the kind of chosen family member who showed up for birthdays, helped with school projects, and provided continuity between their old life and new one. Her presence reminded Connor that family was built through consistency and care rather than biology alone. As the day continued with lazy activities and unscheduled adventures, Connor found himself marveling at how far they'd all traveled from those early days of uncertainty and fear. Victoria no longer worked 18-hour days or traveled constantly for business. Connor had been promoted twice at Boeing, his engineering career rebuilt on a foundation of confidence earned through personal growth rather than external validation. Most importantly, their children were thriving. Emma excelled in school and had developed into a fierce advocate for inclusion and accessibility, largely inspired by her relationship with Lily. Lily had found her voice and her passion, becoming someone who advocated for herself and others with quiet but unshakable determination. Baby Jamie represented their future together, a child born into the love and security they'd built rather than the crisis and uncertainty that had brought them together. Watching Victoria nurse him while simultaneously helping Emma with homework and discussing Lily's summer program schedule, Connor saw the kind of present engaged mother she'd fought to become. 5 years after Connor first knelt beside a wheelchair at an elementary school dance, Riverside Elementary's gymnasium was once again decorated with twinkling lights and paper stars hanging from the ceiling. The annual father-daughter dance continued to be one of the school's most beloved traditions, but this year's event carried special significance for the Mitchell-Chen family. Connor stood near the refreshment table watching 12-year-old Lily lead a workshop on adaptive dance techniques for other children with mobility differences. Her confidence, as she demonstrated wheelchair choreography and taught inclusive movement to a circle of fascinated kids, was a testament to how completely she'd transformed from the invisible child he'd first encountered. "She's amazing," Victoria said, appearing beside him with 3-year-old Jamie on her hip. "Look how naturally she's teaching those kids that dancing is about joy and connection, not about what your body can or can't do." Across the gymnasium, Emma, now 13 and serving as a junior volunteer, was helping younger children make inclusive friendship bracelets, while explaining the importance of seeing people for who they are rather than what makes them different. "I think our girls have learned something important about inclusion," Connor observed, watching Emma patiently help a shy kindergartner choose bracelet colors. The evening's father-daughter dance officially began, and Connor felt a familiar tightness in his chest as he remembered that night 5 years ago when everything had changed. This time he danced with both daughters, spinning Emma in the traditional style, while Lily demonstrated the adaptive techniques that had become her specialty. But the most powerful moment came when the DJ made a special announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special dance tonight." 5 years ago, a father and daughter taught this school about the true meaning of inclusion. Tonight, they're here to remind us that families come in all forms, and love creates space for everyone. The music shifted to the same song Connor had danced to with Lily that first night, and suddenly they were in the center of the gymnasium floor again. But this time they weren't alone. Other children with wheelchairs, crutches, and various mobility aids joined them, along with their fathers, mothers, siblings, and friends. What had begun as one man's decision to include an overlooked child had rippled outward to transform an entire community's understanding of belonging. The elementary school now had accessible playground equipment, adaptive sports programs, and inclusion training for all staff. Other Seattle schools had adopted their model, creating district-wide policies that prioritized accessibility and belonging. "Look around," Connor whispered to Lily as they danced together in the center of the inclusive circle. "This is what happens when someone chooses to see instead of overlook." Lily's eyes shone with tears of joy as she watched children of all abilities dancing together, their fathers spinning them with creative adaptations that ensured everyone could participate fully. "You taught me that being different doesn't mean being less," Lily said, her voice strong enough to carry over the music. "Now I get to teach other kids the same thing." As the dance continued, Victoria joined them on the floor with baby Jamie, creating a family constellation that would have been impossible to imagine 5 years earlier. Other families swirled around them, the gymnasium filled with laughter and music, and the kind of inclusive joy that happens when a community learns to celebrate diversity rather than merely tolerate it. Principal Harrison, who had watched Connor's journey from invisible custodian to celebrated advocate, approached the microphone for the evening's closing remarks. "5 years ago, we learned an important lesson about the difference between seeing and overlooking, between including and excluding, between judging by appearances and recognizing character," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the gymnasium. "Tonight we celebrate not just the father-daughter relationships that bring us together annually, but the community we've built when we choose kindness over convenience, inclusion over exclusion, love over fear." The applause was thunderous, but Connor barely heard it. He was too focused on his family, on the children who'd taught him that broken pieces could create something more beautiful than anything perfect could ever be. As the evening wound down and families began to leave, Connor helped clean up while Victoria organized car seats and evening preparations. The routine was comfortable, practiced the kind of easy partnership that developed between people who'd learned to prioritize each other's needs as much as their own. "Remember when you thought you were just helping a lonely kid eat lunch?" Victoria asked, as they loaded their children into the car for the drive home. Connor looked back at the elementary school where his journey from invisible to essential had begun. "I thought I was showing up for Lily. I had no idea I was really showing up for my own life." The drive home was filled with children's chatter about the evening's highlights, about homework due Monday, about weekend plans that included both ordinary family activities and Lily's upcoming presentation to the Seattle City Council about accessibility improvements in public spaces. As they tucked 3 tired children into their beds and settled into their own quiet evening routine, Connor and Victoria reflected on the unexpected path that had led them to this moment. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd walked past that cafeteria?" Victoria asked, curled against Connor's side on their bedroom couch. "Never," Connor replied without hesitation. "Because I know now that some moments are meant to be, that some connections are strong enough to survive any obstacle, and that choosing to see people instead of overlooking them is the most important work any of us ever do." Their love story had begun with a single decision to include rather than exclude, to see rather than overlook, to show up rather than walk away. 5 years later, it had grown into a family that proved love could bridge any gap when people were brave enough to build that bridge together. In the quiet of their Seattle home, surrounded by the children they were raising to see and value every person they encountered, Connor and Victoria had found what they'd been searching for all along, a love that made everyone involved more than they could have been alone. The invisible girl now helped others feel seen. The forgotten father had rebuilt his life around presence and purpose. The isolated CEO had learned to lead with her heart. And together they'd created a family that showed their community what was possible when love led the way. Their foundation for accessibility and inclusion has helped transform dozens of schools across the Pacific Northwest, creating environments where every child feels valued and seen. The programs they developed continue to ripple outward, proving that individual acts of kindness can reshape entire communities when they're built on genuine love and commitment to justice. Emma and Lily, now teenagers, serve as national advocates for inclusive education, speaking at conferences and consulting with school districts about creating truly accessible learning environments. Their childhood friendship became a blueprint for building bridges across differences of all kinds. And in Seattle's Discovery Park, there stands a small plaque near the butterfly garden, in memory of all the invisible children and in celebration of those who choose to see. Below it, a simple inscription: "Love that starts with a single dance continues to transform lives, one connection at a time." Friends, if this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, if it reminded you that sometimes the most broken moments create the most beautiful beginnings, please don't let it end here. Hit that like button to show your support for stories that matter, and click subscribe to join our channel family, where we share these powerful true stories every week. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that kindness is never wasted, that love can bridge any gap, and that choosing to see the invisible people around us is one of the most important things we can do. Your share might reach exactly the person who needs to hear this message today. Tell us in the comments, have you ever been that person who chose to include someone who was being overlooked? Or have you been on the receiving end of unexpected kindness that changed your life? We love reading your stories, and they inspire our next videos. Thanks for being part of our channel family. Until next time, remember that every single day you have the power to make someone feel seen, valued, and loved. Sometimes the smallest acts of inclusion create the biggest transformations. Keep watching, keep caring, and keep believing that love always wins.